Why the Windows Phone Failed. Journey from Glory to Disaster. The story of the Windows Phone is one of potential unfulfilled. A narrative that captivates tech enthusiasts and industry analysts alike. Launched by Microsoft in 2010, the Windows Phone was designed to rival the iPhone and Android with its sleek interface and unique features. However, what began as a promising venture soon spiraled into a cautionary tale of missteps and missed opportunities. Despite billions invested and strong backing from Microsoft, the platform struggled to gain traction in a fiercely competitive market. A lack of app support and partnerships hampered its growth, ultimately leading to its decline. In this video, we'll explore the reasons behind the Windows Phone's failure, analyzing the strategic blunders that transformed what could have been a success into one of tech history's most notable disasters. Join us as we unravel the journey of the Windows Phone from glory to disaster, uncovering valuable lessons for the future of technology. Part 1. The arrival of the game changer. Let's take a trip back to 2007, a year that would forever change the landscape of technology. At the Macworld conference in San Francisco, Steve Jobs stood on stage, exuding confidence and an aura of showmanship few could rival. The world wasn't ready for what he was about to reveal, and neither were the major players of the mobile industry. Up until that point, the phone market was crowded with devices featuring clunky physical keyboards, small screens, and limited capabilities. Dominating brands like Nokia and BlackBerry were focused on business functionality and communication. Nokia ruled with a diverse lineup, and BlackBerry was the darling of executives, thanks to its seamless email services. But behind closed doors at Apple, something revolutionary was in the making. A device that promised to fuse multiple functions into a single sleek gadget. Jobs knew the weight of the moment. He began his keynote with a deliberate, almost teasing build-up, introducing what he called a widescreen iPod with touch controls, a revolutionary mobile phone, and a breakthrough internet communication device. The room buzzed with anticipation. But the big reveal stunned everyone. These are not three separate devices. Jobs announced, "This is one device, and we are calling it the iPhone." What made the iPhone so revolutionary? The most striking difference was its touchscreen interface. Gone were the days of cumbersome physical keyboards. The iPhone's front was one smooth, continuous display that adjusted to user needs. The simplicity was bold, and the skeptics were loud. Critics panned the device for being overpriced, exclusive to Singular, later AT&T, and limited by 2G speeds. Steve Ballmer, then CEO of Microsoft, famously laughed off the iPhone, predicting it would never gain significant market share. "No chance," he declared, echoing the disbelief of many in the tech world. Despite the cynicism, Apple had seen an opportunity that others had missed. The mobile phone was more than just a tool for making calls or sending texts. It was a portal to a more interconnected digital lifestyle. The iPhone wasn't just about communication. It was about redefining how we interact with our devices. Music players, point-and-shoot cameras, standalone GPS units, all were destined to become relics. As the iPhone combined these features in a single package, it's easy to forget just how limited our devices were back then. Even if some features seemed trivial, the impact of the iPhone's innovations grew exponentially. By the end of 2007, smartphone sales surged, and for the first time, the market for standard mobile phones began to decline. People queued up for hours just to hold this magical device in their hands. And a new era of technology dawned. For Microsoft, the iPhone wasn't merely a competitor, it was a disruptive force that would redefine consumer expectations. As the audience at Macworld 2007 applauded wildly, some executives at Redmond were probably still in denial. Windows Mobile, the company's operating system for smartphones, was about to face a formidable opponent, one they weren't equipped to battle. Part 2. Microsoft's early missteps. Picture the early 2000s. Microsoft was a tech titan with deep pockets, a massive influence over the global software market, and a history of successful product launches. With Windows dominating desktop computing, the company had ventured into mobile devices early. They introduced Windows CE in 1996. An operating system that ran on primitive handheld devices aimed at business users. By the early 2000s, Microsoft's mobile OS had evolved into Windows Mobile, and their devices were highly regarded in professional circles. At the peak of its success, Windows Mobile had a market share of around 15%, enough to establish Microsoft as a mobile leader. But also enough to blind them to the winds of change. Microsoft's mobile ambitions were driven by its familiarity with productivity software. It believed that professionals wanted mini versions of desktop programs in their pockets. Windows Mobile was essentially a scaled-down PC environment, with apps like Word, Excel, and Outlook that mimicked their desktop counterparts. And in many ways, this strategy made sense. It worked well enough for users who needed productivity on the go. And businesses were comfortable with the familiar Microsoft ecosystem. However, this approach came with drawbacks. Windows mobile devices featured resistive touchscreens, which relied on pressure rather than capacitive touch. This meant you often needed a stylus to navigate clunky menus and interfaces designed with the desktop mindset. The system was not optimized for intuitive finger navigation. Unlike the iPhone's multi-touch experience, it was becoming increasingly clear that the mobile market was evolving beyond the needs of business users. But Microsoft didn't catch on fast enough. When the iPhone launched, Microsoft was in a state of disbelief. It didn't help that its leadership, specifically Steve Ballmer, dismissed Apple's innovation. His infamous laughter in response to the iPhone's launch was more than a meme-worthy moment. It was emblematic of Microsoft's failure to grasp the coming storm. Ballmer couldn't fathom why anyone would buy a $500 phone without a physical keyboard. It doesn't appeal to business customers because it doesn't have a keyboard, he argued, which makes it not a very good email machine. But the world was changing rapidly. Consumers were shifting from wanting phones with business-like features to devices that could entertain, connect, and immerse them in a digital experience. Apple understood this shift, and so did Google. In fact, the team at Google had originally designed Android to be more like a BlackBerry competitor. But after witnessing the iPhone's magic, they pivoted to create a touch-first operating system that embraced modern user expectations. As Apple and Google adapted, Microsoft stumbled. It took the company more than a year to respond to the iPhone threat. And by then, the damage was done. What's particularly surprising is that Microsoft had all the ingredients for mobile success. They had experience, they had resources, and they had a reputation for software excellence. Yet, as often happens with giants, they were too slow to pivot. It wasn't that Microsoft didn't have ideas. In fact, there were internal projects and think tanks working on touchscreen technology and other advancements. But bureaucracy and an over-reliance on existing products held the company back. Windows Mobile continued to rely on outdated design philosophies, and the insistence on clunky hardware keyboards made it seem antiquated in a market that was craving simplicity and elegance. Even as Windows Mobile stumbled, some within Microsoft saw the writing on the wall. Reports of internal struggles emerged, with some engineers pushing for radical changes and others clinging to what had once worked. By 2008, when Microsoft finally decided to overhaul its mobile strategy, it was racing against time. Apple had already captured the premium market, and Android was becoming the choice for manufacturers looking to build affordable yet capable smartphones. Microsoft's realization came with the announcement of a completely new operating system, Windows Phone, designed from the ground up with a modern, touch-friendly interface. Yet, even as they announced this bold new vision, questions loomed. Was it too late? Could Microsoft innovate quickly enough to make a dent in the market now dominated by iOS and Android? The answer, as we now know, would be far more complicated than a simple yes or no. Part 3. The rise and fall of a promising ecosystem. When Windows Phone was finally revealed in 2010, the tech world held its breath. This was Microsoft's answer to the iPhone and Android. And boy, did it look different. Windows Phone came with a design philosophy that was truly ahead of its time. Clean lines, bold typography, and a slick interface built around live tiles. While iOS and Android stuck with static grids of app icons, Microsoft offered dynamic, ever-changing tiles that provided real-time updates from apps. It was fresh, innovative, and visually engaging. Critics lauded the unique design, with some even declaring it the most forward-thinking mobile OS on the market. The Metro UI, as it was called, wasn't just a facelift, it was a bold reimagining of what mobile software could be. It focused on simplicity and intuitive navigation, emphasizing content over Chrome. Notifications and information were easily accessible, making the user experience seamless and fluid. Tech reviewers were impressed, and for a moment, it felt like Microsoft had a genuine chance at disrupting the duopoly that was solidifying between iOS and Android. However, despite the applause from industry insiders, problems began to crop up almost immediately. First and foremost, there was the question of apps. In 2010, the app ecosystem was already becoming the cornerstone of smartphone success. iOS and Android were miles ahead in this department, offering tens of thousands of applications that made their platforms desirable to both consumers and developers. In contrast, the Windows Phone Store was barren. While Microsoft tried to woo developers with promises of a robust and easy-to-use platform, many were skeptical. Why spend time and resources developing for an operating system with a minuscule user base when iOS and Android were where the money was? The app gap became painfully evident to users. Sure, Windows Phone had the basics, a web browser, email support, and a few popular apps. But major social media apps like Instagram were absent for years. Even when they arrived, they often lacked features compared to their counterparts on other platforms. There was no Snapchat, no proper YouTube app, and a glaring lack of support from high-profile developers. If you were a Windows Phone user, you were constantly reminded of what you didn't have. This app deficit didn't just frustrate users, it deterred potential buyers from ever giving the platform a chance. Microsoft's strategy to solve this app dilemma was a mix of financial incentives and partnerships. But even billions of dollars couldn't buy a long-term developer loyalty. It became a vicious cycle. Developers didn't create apps because there weren't enough users. And users didn't flock to the platform because of the lack of apps. Ironically, this was happening while Microsoft was building an ecosystem that, in many ways, had massive potential. Think about it. Seamless integration with Windows PCs, Xbox Live connectivity, and access to Microsoft's suite of productivity tools like Office and OneDrive. The promise was there, but it felt perpetually out of reach. Another major setback came from Microsoft's complex relationships with smartphone manufacturers. When the company launched Windows Phone, it imposed stringent hardware requirements to ensure a consistent user experience. While this made sense from a quality control perspective, it severely limited the diversity of devices. In a world where Android offered everything from ultra-premium flagships to dirt-cheap budget phones, Windows Phone devices seemed few and far between. Companies like Samsung and HTC experimented with Windows Phone, but their focus remained firmly on Android, which offered more freedom and, frankly, better sales prospects. This left Microsoft in a precarious position. They needed a savior, a manufacturer that would fully commit to Windows Phone and give it the fighting chance it desperately needed. Enter Nokia. The once mighty Finnish giant had been struggling in the smartphone race. And in 2011, they made a radical move. They went all in on Windows Phone, signing a strategic partnership that many thought could change the tide for both companies. The first Nokia Windows Phone, the Lumia 800, launched with high expectations and, to some extent, delivered. Nokia's hardware was stunning, blending exquisite design with cutting-edge technology. For a moment, it seemed like the Microsoft-Nokia alliance might actually work. But then reality struck. The smartphone market was evolving at breakneck speed, and neither Microsoft nor Nokia could keep up. Android devices, in particular, were flooding the market with innovations in both hardware and software, while the iPhone continued to set the gold standard for user experience. Even with beautiful devices like the Lumia 920, which introduced optical image stabilization in vibrant color designs, Nokia couldn't turn the tide. The once iconic brand's market share kept dwindling, and with it, Windows Phone's hopes of survival. Microsoft, sensing that it needed even more control, made a bold and costly move. In 2014, it acquired Nokia's mobile division for $7.2 billion, a decision that some saw as a last-ditch effort to rescue Windows Phone. But instead of rejuvenating the platform, the acquisition only highlighted Microsoft's missteps. The integration was a logistical nightmare, and Microsoft's mobile strategy became even murkier. By the time the dust settled, the market had largely moved on, and it was too late for Windows Phone to catch up. Part 4. Strategic Missteps and Microsoft's Identity Crisis. If there's one thing to be learned from the Windows Phone saga, it's that even the most powerful companies can falter when they lose sight of their strengths and misjudge market dynamics. By 2014, as Microsoft's $7.2 billion acquisition of Nokia's mobile division was being finalized, it was clear the tech giant was struggling to find its place in a rapidly changing world. Windows Phone wasn't just a product. It was supposed to symbolize Microsoft's ability to innovate beyond its software roots and compete toe-to-toe with Apple and Google. Yet, the journey was anything but smooth. Let's start with one of the most puzzling issues: the ever-evolving branding and positioning of Microsoft's mobile efforts. Before Windows Phone, there was Windows Mobile, a clunky, outdated operating system that was primarily geared toward business users and handheld PCs. It worked for a while but crumbled in the face of more user-friendly interfaces like iOS and Android. When Windows Phone launched, Microsoft wanted to distance itself from the old Windows Mobile legacy. But instead of a smooth transition, there was widespread confusion. Was this a reboot? A replacement? And why should anyone trust Microsoft to get it right this time? Especially after years of neglecting its mobile strategy? To make matters more complex, Microsoft's decision to double down on integrating Windows Phone with the broader Windows ecosystem was a double-edged sword. The idea was sound: leverage Microsoft's dominance in the PC market to entice users into a cohesive digital experience across all their devices. In theory, this made perfect sense. If you were a Windows user, having a phone that synced flawlessly with your PC, Xbox, and cloud services like OneDrive seemed like a no-brainer. However, in practice, this vision was poorly executed. Instead of feeling like an integrated ecosystem, the experience often felt disjointed and half-baked. Continuity between devices was patchy, and features were either missing or difficult to use. The synergy that Microsoft envisioned never truly materialized. Then there was the issue of timing. In the tech world, being too early can be almost as detrimental as being too late. When Microsoft introduced its Universal Windows Platform, UWP, the idea was revolutionary: a single codebase that developers could use to create apps that worked across PCs, tablets, and phones. But this forward-thinking concept was launched before developers were ready. And, more critically, before there was a compelling user base to support it. Developers were hesitant to invest resources in a platform that lacked users. And users weren't flocking to Windows Phone because of the lack of apps. It was a classic catch-22. And Microsoft's ambitious attempt to future-proof its ecosystem only highlighted the company's inability to execute when it mattered most. The internal culture at Microsoft during this period also played a pivotal role in Windows Phone's demise. Under then-CEO Steve Ballmer, Microsoft was a company divided. Different divisions competed rather than collaborated, and the Windows team was notoriously territorial. The infighting led to a lack of cohesive strategy. For instance, Microsoft Office, one of the company's crown jewels, was not available on Windows Phone at launch. It sounds absurd now, but at the time, Office's mobile exclusivity on iOS and Android sent a confusing message. Even Microsoft wasn't fully invested in its own platform. This dysfunction extended to how Microsoft managed its partnerships. Instead of fostering strong relationships with hardware manufacturers, the company's tight grip on the Windows Phone ecosystem alienated potential allies. Hardware partners like Samsung, HTC, and LG, who had dabbled in producing Windows phones, felt sidelined. Why pour resources into a platform when Microsoft itself seemed ambivalent? Especially after it decided to buy Nokia and make its own hardware? The acquisition not only created friction with partners but also signaled to the market that Windows Phone was becoming a closed ecosystem. Much like Apple's iPhone, a move that contradicted the open philosophy that made Android so successful. Moreover, consumer perception of Windows Phone was marred by Microsoft's sporadic and inconsistent marketing efforts. While Apple and Google were crafting clear, compelling narratives about their ecosystems, Microsoft's messaging felt scattered. Campaigns focused on technical features rather than user experience, and the brand struggled to connect emotionally with consumers. Remember the "Smoked by Windows Phone" campaign? It was clever but failed to highlight why anyone should choose Windows Phone for their everyday needs. Not just speed tests in controlled environments. One of the most glaring oversights was how Microsoft underestimated the importance of market momentum. By the time Windows Phone 8.1 rolled out with features that users had been clamoring for, like a notification center and a digital assistant, Cortana, the market had already matured. iOS and Android weren't static, they evolved rapidly, incorporating feedback and setting new standards. Meanwhile, Windows Phone was perpetually playing catch-up, even when it had genuinely innovative features, such as Cortana's deep integration with Microsoft services. They were overshadowed by the competition's dominance and relentless innovation. As the mobile landscape shifted, Microsoft found itself pouring resources into a platform that was increasingly becoming irrelevant. The company's ambitious plans for global expansion were hampered by slow rollout strategies, especially in emerging markets where Android's low-cost devices had already captured consumer loyalty. And in developed markets, the lack of flagship Windows phones from third-party manufacturers made it impossible to challenge premium iPhones and Galaxies. All these strategic missteps compounded into a growing sense of doubt, both internally and among consumers. Even Microsoft's staunchest supporters had to wonder if the company couldn't get developers, hardware partners, or even its own teams fully behind Windows Phone. Why should anyone else care? The cracks in Microsoft's grand vision for a unified ecosystem were widening, and the dream of a mobile resurgence began to fade into a cautionary tale of ambition met with poor execution. Part 5. Lessons learned: what Microsoft could have done differently. The saga of the Windows Phone serves as a poignant case study in the world of technology, illustrating the fine line between innovation and oblivion. As we dissect the failures and missteps that led to its downfall, it's essential to highlight the lessons that Microsoft, and indeed, other tech companies, can draw from this tale of ambition and adversity. What could Microsoft have done differently to alter the course of its mobile fate? Let's explore. 1. A stronger initial strategy. One of the critical factors in the Windows Phone's failure was the lack of a cohesive, long-term strategy from the very beginning. When Microsoft launched Windows Phone 7 in 2010, the mobile landscape was already fiercely competitive. To break into a market dominated by Apple and Google, Microsoft needed to present a compelling alternative that could not only attract users but also engage developers. Instead, the company chose to prioritize a flashy user interface over addressing the essential needs of developers and consumers alike. A stronger initial strategy would have involved a more gradual rollout, allowing Microsoft to gather feedback and iterate on the platform before making bold claims about its capabilities. By focusing on core functionalities, such as compatibility with popular apps and services, Microsoft could have built a more stable foundation on which to grow. Additionally, fostering relationships with third-party developers early on would have paved the way for a robust app ecosystem that users crave. 2. Better communication and marketing. Microsoft's communication strategy, or lack thereof, played a significant role in the perception of Windows Phone. While the company touted the benefits of its live tiles and seamless integration with Windows services, these messages often fell flat or failed to reach their intended audience. Marketing campaigns lacked the punch and clarity that competitors like Apple executed so well. Apple's "I'm a Mac, I'm a PC" campaign, for instance, personified its products and made them relatable. In contrast, Microsoft's messaging often felt too technical and disconnected from everyday users. To win over consumers, Microsoft could have focused on storytelling, showcasing real-world scenarios where Windows Phone devices could enhance daily life. Highlighting unique features, such as the seamless integration of Microsoft Office or the robust security measures inherent in Windows devices, would have resonated with business users and consumers alike. 3. Addressing the app ecosystem early. As previously discussed, the app ecosystem was a critical battleground in the mobile market. To establish Windows Phone as a viable alternative to iOS and Android, Microsoft needed to engage developers from the start, offering incentives not just to build apps but also to port existing ones. Collaborating with popular app creators to develop exclusive content or features for Windows Phone could have created a buzz around the platform and attracted users curious about these unique offerings. Moreover, a focus on building a user-friendly app store would have been essential. Microsoft should have made it easier for developers to create, publish, and maintain their apps on Windows Phone, streamlining the submission process, providing comprehensive support and documentation, and offering marketing assistance for new apps could have encouraged a vibrant app ecosystem much earlier in the game. 4. Embracing cross-platform strategies. The idea of being a one-stop shop for users was appealing. But in a world where cross-platform usage was becoming increasingly prevalent, Microsoft should have embraced this trend rather than resisted it. The reluctance to fully adopt cross-platform capabilities meant that Windows Phone users were often left wanting. Instead of limiting apps to the Windows ecosystem, Microsoft could have focused on building bridges with popular platforms, allowing for seamless functionality between devices regardless of operating systems. This approach could have helped solidify Windows Phone's position in the market as a versatile option that works harmoniously with other devices and services. Microsoft could have leveraged its existing services, like Azure and Office, to create a more interconnected user experience that appealed to a broader audience. 5. Learning from competitors. Competitor analysis is vital in any industry, but Microsoft's understanding of its rivals fell short. The company failed to recognize the importance of building a community around its platform. Apple and Google cultivated devoted fan bases that extended beyond mere product offerings. They understood that engagement, advocacy, and user satisfaction were just as critical as technical specifications. Microsoft could have invested in building a Windows Phone community by organizing events, hackathons, and forums where developers and users could share ideas, solve problems, and collaborate on projects. By fostering a sense of belonging and investment in the platform, Microsoft could have created advocates who would actively promote Windows Phone to their networks, helping to alleviate some of the negativity surrounding its adoption. 6. Prioritizing user feedback. Finally, one of the most glaring lessons from the Windows Phone saga is the importance of listening to user feedback. Microsoft did not sufficiently engage with its user base to understand their needs, pain points, and preferences. Continuous engagement through surveys, user forums, and beta testing programs could have helped Microsoft to refine its products and features in response to user input. Embracing an iterative development process that allowed for quick changes based on real-world use could have made Windows Phone more adaptable and responsive to consumer desires. The more users feel heard and valued, the more likely they are to remain loyal to a brand, especially in the ever-evolving tech landscape. Conclusion. The journey of the Windows Phone from its promising launch to its eventual demise offers a wealth of insights for Microsoft and other tech companies alike. By learning from the missteps of the past, such as developing a stronger initial strategy, refining communication and marketing approaches, engaging developers early, embracing cross-platform strategies, learning from competitors, and prioritizing user feedback, companies can navigate the treacherous waters of innovation and avoid the pitfalls that led to Windows Phone's tragic fall. In a world where mobile technology continues to shape how we communicate and interact, these lessons remain vital. The legacy of Windows Phone may be one of lost potential, but its story will endure as a cautionary tale for future generations of tech innovators. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the rise and fall of Windows Phone. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think are the key takeaways from this story? And what other tech failures would you like us to explore in future videos? Let's keep the conversation going.